Paris is often called the City of Light, but its true identity is written in stone. Across centuries, the city's architecture has evolved quietly, deliberately, and with restraint. Medieval churches, grand palaces, and carefully proportioned boulevards coexist not in competition, but in harmony. Unlike cities defined by height, Paris tells its story through balance, symmetry, and continuity. Its skyline is not a display of ambition, but a reflection of choice. Each era left its mark without overpowering the last, creating a city where architecture serves culture rather than spectacle. To understand Paris, one must understand its buildings, not as isolated monuments, but as parts of a carefully composed whole. Paris was never meant to be tall. It was meant to endure. The architectural story of Paris begins in the medieval era, a time when faith shaped the city's most ambitious structures. Gothic landmarks like Notre Dame Cathedral rose above the surrounding fabric, reaching upward with pointed arches, flying buttresses, and luminous stained glass. Completed in the 13th century, the cathedral stood not only as a place of worship, but as a declaration of the Church's authority and spiritual power. Yet this vertical ambition was the exception, not the rule. Beyond the cathedrals and towers, medieval Paris remained low and compact. Narrow streets, modest buildings, and dense neighborhoods defined everyday life. Height was reserved for the sacred, while the city itself stayed grounded. In medieval Paris, verticality belonged to belief, not to the city as a whole. As the medieval era faded, Paris began to change, not by rising higher, but by becoming more deliberate. The Renaissance introduced a return to classical ideals inspired by ancient Rome and Greece. Proportion, symmetry, and order replaced the spiritual verticality of the Gothic period. Architecture was no longer about reaching the heavens, but about achieving balance on the ground. The Louvre embodies this shift. Once a medieval fortress, it was transformed into a royal palace defined by horizontal expansion, rhythmic facades, and carefully measured symmetry. Influenced by Italian architects and artists, Paris adopted a new architectural language, refined, controlled, and unmistakably human in scale. During the Renaissance, Paris did not look upward for meaning. It looked outward, shaping space with restraint rather than height. Elevation was symbolic, not architectural. In the 17th century, architecture became a stage for power. Grandeur, movement, and emotion defined the era, most famously embodied by the Palace of Versailles. Though located outside Paris, Versailles shaped the city's architectural mindset, setting a model of authority expressed through scale, symmetry, and ceremonial space. Within Paris, buildings like the Church of the Val de Grâce translated Baroque principles into the urban fabric. Elaborate facades, controlled light, and richly detailed interiors were designed to inspire awe and reinforce the dominance of both monarchy and church. Yet even in its most theatrical moments, Paris remained restrained. Baroque architecture expanded outward, not upward. Power was displayed through composition and ornamentation, not through height. It perfected its horizontal order. Under the rule of Emperor Napoleon III, Baron Georges Eugène Haussmann was tasked with reshaping the city, not by making it taller, but by making it orderly. Medieval streets were erased, replaced by wide boulevards, open vistas, and carefully planned public spaces. Paris was rebuilt with intention. Haussmannian buildings introduced a strict architectural code. Uniform facades, aligned cornices, wrought iron balconies, and mansard roofs created a continuous urban rhythm. Height was regulated, proportions were controlled, and individuality was subordinated to harmony. This was not accidental. Haussmann's Paris was designed to be legible, governable, and beautiful. In Paris, even progress respected restraint. At the heart of this era stood the Eiffel Tower. Built for the Exposition Universelle of 1889, Gustave Eiffel's structure rose above the city unlike anything before it. Radical, industrial, and unapologetically vertical, the tower was fiercely criticized at the time, seen by many as a temporary provocation rather than a permanent symbol, and that distinction matters. The Eiffel Tower did not redefine Parisian architecture, it stood apart from it. While the tower reached upward, the city around it continued to expand horizontally. Landmarks like the Grand Palais and Petit Palais embraced the Beaux-Arts tradition. Grand arches, sculptural detail, and vast glass roofs, all emphasizing breadth, symmetry, and spectacle at ground level. It did not reimagine how high the city should rise. Modern architects sought clarity, efficiency, and new ways of living, Figures like Le Corbusier and Auguste Perret introduced architecture rooted in function, open plans, and industrial materials such as concrete, steel, and glass. Their work rejected ornament, favouring logic and simplicity. Le Corbusier's Villa Savoyer exemplifies this shift. Elevated on pilotis and surrounded by open landscape, it proposed a new relationship between architecture and nature. Yet it was deliberately removed from the dense urban fabric. Modern ideas were tested in isolation, not imposed upon the historic city. Paris did not resist modernism, it contained it. The city evolved without surrendering its identity. One of the most radical statements of this period was the Centre Pompidou. Completed in the 1970s by Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers, the building turned architecture inside out. Structural elements, mechanical systems, and circulation were exposed and colour-coded, creating a deliberate rupture with Paris's historic fabric. The contrast was intentional. Pompidou did not blend in. It announced that modernity could exist in Paris, but only as a clearly defined exception. Innovation was allowed to be bold, but it was carefully framed within the existing city. This strategy became even clearer with the development of La Défense. Rather than reshaping the historic centre, Paris relocated its vertical ambitions beyond it. Skyscrapers rose not beside Notre Dame or the Louvre, but at a distance, contained, organised, and separated from the city's traditional silhouette. In recent years, Paris has continued to evolve, carefully balancing contemporary expression with historical continuity. One of the most striking examples is the Fondation Louis Vuitton. Designed by Frank Gehry and set within the Bois de Boulogne, the building embraces fluid forms and layered glass surfaces that echo movement rather than mass. Its architecture does not dominate the skyline. Instead, it dissolves into its surroundings, engaging with light, landscape, and perspective. At the same time, Paris has reaffirmed its commitment to preservation. The restoration of Notre Dame Cathedral following the devastating fire of 2019 became a global symbol of this resolve. While modern techniques and materials were employed, the goal was never reinvention, only continuity. In contemporary Paris, innovation is welcomed, but always on the city's terms. New architecture may experiment with form and material, but it does so without challenging the city's established silhouette. Paris moves forward by refining what already exists, not by reaching higher than it ever intended. It simply refuses to let height redefine its identity, yet this identity is not accidental. It is the result of deliberate resistance. For decades, Paris has maintained strict limitations on vertical construction. City planners, architects, and residents have consistently argued that skyscrapers would fracture the city's visual harmony. Tall buildings would cast shadows over Haussmannian boulevards, disrupt carefully aligned streetscapes, and erode the human scale that defines everyday life in Paris. Environmental considerations reinforce this stance. Access to light, open views, and breathable urban space remains a priority. Height regulations are not merely aesthetic decisions. They are tools designed to protect the city's lived experience. Through zoning laws and planning controls, Paris has chosen coherence over spectacle. It is a living narrative, one that continues to grow, not upward, but forward. The future of Parisian architecture is increasingly shaped by sustainability. New initiatives focus on reducing carbon emissions, expanding green spaces, and reintegrating nature into the urban environment. Rather than building higher, the city is learning how to build more responsibly. Projects aligned with long-term environmental strategies envision a Paris that breathes more freely. Greener rooftops, pedestrian-centered streets, energy-efficient buildings, and public transportation systems designed to reduce dependence on cars. Innovation, once again, is directed toward improving life at street level. What defines Paris's future is not a dramatic shift in form, but a refinement of values. The city remains committed to preserving its historic character while adapting to the realities of climate, population, and sustainability. Paris's architectural history is not a closed chapter. Some are meant to remain grounded and timeless. It is a story of intention. From the spires of Notre Dame to the disciplined lines of Haussmannian boulevards, each era added to the city without erasing the last. Paris did not chase spectacle. It cultivated continuity. Architecture here became a language of balance between power and restraint, innovation and memory. What makes Paris extraordinary is not what it built, but what it chose not to build. While other cities reached upward, Paris refined its horizon, preserving a human scale that invites movement, encounter, and reflection. Paris is not a frozen museum, nor is it a city trapped in the past. It is a living composition, one that evolves by protecting its essence.